Thank you. The sound is okay? A little bit feedback. Okay. My name is Salve Nielsen. I'm from Oslo. I'm part here for many reasons, and one of them is to give this talk about a little project I'm trying to start now. I've called it Kaizendo. That quickly means the way of continuous improvement. Is from Japanese. You might have figured that one out. It's about textbooks and free software. And with textbooks, we mean school books, if you're not familiar with that word. So what's the problem we're trying to solve? Let's start a little with the situation in classes. Textbooks are for classes, not pupils, which means if you have a special need of some kind, the school book will help you a little, but not all the way. This could mean if you're colorblind, or you have dyslexia, or you come from a literate home, which means you learn early how to read quickly. Your problem will probably be that you're getting through your material quicker than the rest, and you're bored half of the time. Or you come from a home with lots of distractions. You don't find the quietness to read all that's necessary. Or you want something more interesting to read. It's something different would be more fun for you. Chances are you won't get this, certainly not from the textbooks. And you're a pupil, and you have to accept it as things are today. We should improve this, as I was thinking one day. I've been thinking about this for many years now, so this is kind of, let's try and actually do something about this. Let's try to make individually customizable textbooks. This is what the project is about. But before we go into that, let's take a little bit of a look at the basics here so we can get some context. If we look at software and textbooks, there are lots of similarities. I've listed a few here. They are instructions. They're written with the text language. And it has a purpose of some sort. Textbooks might be written in Norwegian or English, and software might be written in C or Java or whatever. About the people, there are lots of similarities there too. You have an author in one which writes things, or a developer. You need people who care. This should have been lined up a little bit, but oh well. And it is the kind of ideals you're striving towards in order to write this text. Like there's a match between the purpose, what you're trying to achieve, and the actual implementation. You don't want software which says it makes your robot create something and doesn't do it. It's the same with textbooks. And in the act of writing things, you have the same type of requirements from the environment around you and your tools, and there's lots of things that are required. And when you actually get down to doing the writing, lots of commonalities there too, like you write something. Yeah, of course, this is obvious stuff. You compile it into something, then you distribute it so the user can find it, and when the user finds it, he reads it or runs it in order to achieve some kind of effect, say, for example, learn or be amused or something like that. Yay. So what? So there are some similarities, okay? This is not perhaps very interesting, but let's try and make it a little bit more interesting. Let's see if we can add free software to this mixture. This is why I'm talking here about this and not at some learners convention, because free software is the interesting bits here. Let's assume there are something called textbook freedoms, like software freedoms. So let's take Free Software Foundation's 4 freedoms about reading, using, changing, copying, distributing. And a few more, like it's nice to have the publicity of writing free software because you can get easier jobs. And it's natural to share stuff. But if you put this to the publishing sector, they will start saying, yeah, you guys are pirates. We don't like you to copy and distribute our books. There's luckily some issues that are being solved with Creative Commons and such, so we can think this is at least being solved. But when I talk about other free software things like the community bit, the feedback loops, like being able to talk with the developers or the authors, or that there's a responsive community around the book or a software project, this gets a little bit strange in the publishing world. Of course, sometimes this is things you want, but it's not a natural situation as far as I know. Same with the principles of free software. Release early, release often, or there's a strong integration between the tools that create the good communication in free software community and the ways they communicate, like RC channels that have a bot in them that gives commit reports when somebody puts something in the code repository. This doesn't make sense when writing books. This is silly. And think about all the tools that we're using, about bug trackers and wikis and searchable web archives for mailing lists, commit mails from the repository. This is silly. IRC channels with karma and effort tracking. This is something very common in the Perl community where I come from. It doesn't make sense in the publishing world. So if we add free software to the thought process here, it doesn't make sense. It's not a meaningful comparison as it's on the basic level. Okay, what can we do with that? How should we interpret this? Development methods in free and open software. It's for lots of people, but writing textbooks, that's very few people do this by tradition. You have the author and perhaps an editor, and perhaps just a few more people who do a little bit of checking. So you can use it, it just doesn't make sense to do it as things are today, unless we make individually customizable textbooks. Then the world changes a little. Our ambition can make things possible, make a difficult and pointless thing into something useful and interesting. And with customizable, I mean not just, variations of each chapter. I mean not just easy or difficult text. I mean variations in requirements, in what's needed by the pupil. Say, for example, teaching styles or pedagogical methods that the teacher can use in order to convey the knowledge the best for that particular child. The abilities of that child. Some kids come from an environment where it's easier to get smart than others. And it's okay, this is part of life, and we should be able to make something out of this, in my opinion. Life situation. Sometimes a family goes through a difficult period. Let it be a little bit less to read, but you still get the points and the important bits in the text. School requirements. You have so many hours available during a year, or you have laws that you have to follow. Yes, and available time, as I said. Okay, how about story variations? We're talking about books here, and books have a middle and a beginning, a middle, and an end, and they tell a story preferably, except when you're looking at references. The stories like how was World War II for the Belgians, the Dutch, the Swedes, the Chinese, told from the viewpoint of the Belgians, the Dutch, or the Chinese, or whoever. And how about if the textbook helped you understand it then and there? What's easier to learn is another thing, like integrals. There are several ways of telling how integrals work, and some ways might map better to the mind model of the child than others. And it would be nice to choose. And when you choose one, the rest of the textbooks follow that mind model, that way of telling how things work based on this. How about executive summaries? Hey, Business people should log in. Daddy, can you help me with my homework? Who has children here? Yeah, this would be nice to be able to say, I'll just pick up the little bit of stuff that I don't remember now, but I can refresh. This is a short version just for parents. I would like to see this. There's a problem, and we're talking about lots of combinations of abilities of a text, and to choose what's necessary for that child. I've just tried to give you a picture here. This is a lot to write. It's way too much to write. It's so much that it's expensive, and this is one of the reasons these kinds of books do not exist. Even if it's nice, there's no publisher in the world who would want to make a book that perhaps costs 20 times as much to create in order just to sell a 20th of the amount it's cost to do it, of what they would expect to sell it for. All right? But we know free software and how it works, and the processes of creating code and the communication all around this. And this is what the project is about, and that's why I'm here, to tell you and figure out if any of you are interested in helping. This is the website. There's more. How much time do I have left? Okay. I can go into a little more details. This is just not a pitch anymore. It's some thoughts on how to implement it. This, of course, is a kind of a blue skies. We would like to do something thing. There's no code involved right now. It's just more finding people who are interested in this topic and see if there's if we can make this happen. This is what I'm going to do. Let's look at some thoughts on implementation. Here's a wall of text. We have all kinds of things that need to be done to make this happen. Represent the text in some way, making an annotation system so that regular users can give feedback on the text. That's what the open source thing is about. You don't write the whole book and everybody writes it like the Wikibooks project, but you keep it as one text with an editor, but you get feedback, almost like bug reports or even patches or complaints on the IRC channel that this sucks. This is actually useful information. There's all kinds of stuff that is useful, and people who know tools and would like to make them fit into this framework and help things actually stick together and become useful and distributable, and we'd like to see that. One very useful tool there is called Compt. It's a French project from a person called Philippe Agrin and his gang of people in Paris. It's behind a net site called comment.net, which is basically select the text and start a discussion about the text selection. And what is selected, an amount of discussion around that text gets a yellow background on the text, and orange and red and black, depending on how much text, how much discussion is around that phrase. This is based on the Free Software Foundation's discussion around GPL3. They had a tool called STET, which tested this, and it worked really well. And they made something more thought through and working. Git is obviously there. The branching and merging is something which looks similar to having different variations of a chapter. So it's kind of natural to put something in there like this. But there's no rules right now. We're in the beginning of the project. If you'd like to help, then bring your suggestions. Having said this, tools are not enough. We're talking about writing books here, so we need people who write textbooks. But there is a good way of doing this is actually thinking, we have a book, and there are several books out there that you can start with, which have a free software type license, like Creative Commons share-like version of that. You will find those on Wikibooks, on several other web pages. There's in Norway, which I'm very familiar with, there's a project called the National Digital Learning Arena, NDLA, which basically has bought up a bunch of books, teaching material for kids up to 18 years old, I think, all kinds of topics, and released them with the share-alike license and Creative Commons. Using that as a basis, you can start improving one chapter at a time after whatever is required. By the way, the people in the icons on the right you see over there, that's a way of just an illustration on how a discussion between the users and the authors of a book might happen. Another interesting little tidbit is that even the Americans are thinking about free software books. This is an actual thing going on in the Congress, that's out there right now. So there will be enough textbooks, that's the big thing. If you're interested, talk with me. I'll be hanging out outside. I'll be at the FOSDEM. Thank you very much.